How are you? Some of you are like, hurry it up, already you're doing that. I'm Judy Wilson. I'm the Director of Creative Writing here at SMSU. I want to thank you all for coming to our latest Perceptions launch party. For those of you who are not familiar with Perceptions, it's SMSU's journal produced by a student organization / club, right? Designed to showcase the art and literary achievements of the SMSU community. The journal is supported by faculty advisors and is funded through SAFAC. It comes out once a year in the spring, and the students usually have their launch at the end of the spring semester, but the last couple of years have been anything but usual. So, we thank you for joining us at this time to celebrate the good work that eventually became Volume 13, right, of Perceptions. The first piece to be read is by Lily MacArthur. Now, Lily was a PSEO student when she wrote this piece, and she is apparently very gifted, and it's one of the first pieces in this issue. Lily couldn't be here today, but she gave us permission to read her piece, and she actually sent along a little intro for it that I will read now. As a high school student, being able to write at the collegiate level was a tremendous personal accomplishment. The classes that I attended at SMSU helped me grow as an author and as a person. The work started as a simple assignment for a creative writing class. The main inspiration behind this short story was my friends and the strong relationship we have together. Without that connection that I share with these friends, this work wouldn't have turned out the way it did. The bond I have with them is extremely important to me, so being able to express that bond in words is incredible. Her piece, Sweet Lungs, will be read by Meagan Hansen, who will then serve to introduce our remaining readers. If you have the program, you can kind of follow along with the order of things, so you can see where we are over the course of time here. Okay, I know some of you are pressed for time, and I want you to relax. We're going to get out of here before your next class. Okay, let me introduce Meagan Hansen. She is from Laverne, Minnesota. She is a sophomore at SMSU. She's pursuing a creative writing major. She says she spends an awful lot of time listening to music, reading, and writing short stories. And after graduating from SMSU, she hopes to become an author. Please welcome Meagan Hansen.
Streaks of maroon, peach, and gold color the skyline. The wind is bitter, nipping at ears and noses. But we wear only hoodies and jeans. We take no notice of the weather, our minds traveling farther than we have ever been ourselves. Shoes crunch on ice-covered pavement, but the sound is drowned out by tumultuous laughter. We shout and jeer at one another, as we always do. People turn their heads away from their families or their phones, faces layered with disdain or annoyance. They act as if their stares will silence us, but they never do. Nothing they could ever say in a glance will make us behave in a way that they like. We wander to the car, its icy blue paint fitting for the season. The lock clicks and the horn blares, earning another bout of giggles. The joke only known by us few. Small secrets that no one could understand unless they were one of us. One complains about the air, the cold finally reaching our unprotected skin. Doors pop open and we clamber into the cold interior, not helping our chills. We shiver against each other, and one demands another to heat up the car. The engine churns to life, ushering in faint sighs of relief. Seconds tick by before a warm draft flows through the cab of the car, soothing the goosebumps crawling along our arms and legs. One demands music, reaching for the cord in the front seat. Another complies and pushes it closer to the outstretched hand. As one searches for the perfect song, another shifts gears and pulls away from the parking lot. We all grin as music fills our ears, speakers blaring and shaking the windows. People outside can probably hear everything, but we don't mind. Our music is a blessing. It makes our hearts soar and empties our minds of any care. Our music echoes in our very being. Smoke fills our lungs and eventually fills the car, white mist smelling of ice and candy. Its sickly sweet smell gives us headaches, but our minds are already far off. Singing voices swirl and mix with the smoke. The sun slowly dies as night takes over, blues and deep purples swallowing the bright reds and golds. We drive and drive with no destination, only pure adolescent bliss. We drive without a care for our future, without a care in the world, because we don't care, and I don't think we ever will. And next up reading, we have Zach Haberman. He's reading his two pieces, I Swear I Barely Even Touched Him, and Crawling Up from Hell. Zach Haberman is a junior from Blooming Prairie, Minnesota. He's a creative writing major working towards one day publishing a novel and traveling to every country that he can. Please welcome Zach Haberman.
So the first one I'm going to be reading is I Swear I Barely Even Touched Him. It's a short nonfiction piece about a turkey that lived on my farm. Folks say that turkeys are so stupid that if it starts raining, they will turn their heads to the sky and stare upwards, beaks wide open until they drown. While this is a wild claim to make, and certainly not a true one, it isn't an exaggeration to call domesticated turkeys dumber than rocks. While living at my brother's farm, we owned around a dozen turkeys. Our dogs, however, would hunt the birds for sport. The dogs were adept at getting out of their pens, and the poor birds had no such luck escaping their jaws. Pair that with the deadly chill of a Minnesota winter, and only 4 of the turkeys reached adulthood. Oddly enough, it was an even split, 2 male, 2 female. This culling winter did not limit itself to the turkeys quartet, however, and the best bet for keeping any of our birds alive was to have them all in the same building. A collection of chickens, ducks, turkeys, and quail hid from the cold in a single barn. The ducks had a habit of spilling their water dishes and making a mess of the straw-covered floor. While they were more built for these conditions, our other birds were not, including the turkeys. That did not stop the much larger birds from asserting a sort of dominance over everything smaller than them. Turkeys, when threatened or anxious, puff up and flare out their feathers to make themselves look larger. Unnecessary when you are already twice the size of your company, but it made an impression. That was how the males announced their presence, accompanied by a sound similar to a sneeze. The females resorted to physical means, pecking at the heads of other birds who got near their food or just bullying them for no real reason. They had no patience for the flighty little chickens that darted between their dinosaur legs. Being much larger than the turkeys, I had nothing to worry about when I did my daily chores. In fact, I toyed with them, teasing them by patting them on the head or pushing them out of my way. Sometimes they were too eager to get at the bird feed and would stick their heads in the bags while I was still holding it. The females would squawk and run away, and the smaller of the 2 males would do the same, but the biggest of the 4 would puff himself up and tuck his head into his chest feathers. He was the leader of this troop and would not show fear. It was all fun and games to me. One night after work, I was going through the motions, bucket of water in hand to give the birds their sustenance. The big Tom, followed by his fellows, crept up on my heels as I emptied my bucket. As I passed him by, I patted him on the head and heard the signature sneeze as his feathers spread out. I ignored him and walked out the door. I filled the bucket with water once more so I could fill the pig's trough. Afterward, I returned to the barn and was welcomed with the sight of the turkey flat on his back. In the 5 minutes I'd been gone, he'd gone dead and cold. No sign of injury and no sign of illness beforehand. When my brother, not one to let a meat bird go to waste, cut him open, blood poured from the bird's lungs. Our theory? When he puffed up, the stress ruptured a blood vessel in the bird's lungs. By patting a turkey on the head, I'd given him a pulmonary embolism. I was dumbfounded. We ended up butchering the bird, so at least he didn't die in vain, but still the circumstances were odd. A couple years later, my brother and sister-in-law still make jokes about my parent death touch. If my niece is causing issues, her mother will look to me and say, "Zach, do your thing." If you insist, I always reply. That said, I'm still worried to touch turkeys on the heads. After all, it happened once. Who's to say it won't happen again? And then the second one, Crawling Up from Hell, is a bit longer. It's a fiction piece. Can't really say what inspired it because I don't remember, but it turned out longer than I expected. The plate in the ceiling shifted. A square pillar of light shone down, announcing the fall of another angel. His screams reached me before the sight of his feet, though they soon followed, as did the rest of his body as they lowered him into my pit by a rope wrapped around his arms. He wailed, tears and spit flailing about. "Please," he choked on his tears. The light came from behind him, so shadows shrouded his face from my view. By his raspy voice, I presumed he was old for a human, old enough for his children to have children. That, or he had been crying for a long time. Either was likely. I don't want to die. I didn't even do anything wrong. They rarely did. The rope halted, and the only movement was the man swinging in place. I reached up with a limb and grabbed the rope. The man paused when he felt my grip, then he screamed until his voice broke. Please, please don't let it take me. I don't want to die, please. I'll do anything. I'll give you my house, my land, please. Oh, please, I'll give you my daughter, my granddaughter, anything. The fall was never graceful. I snapped the rope and the plate in the ceiling slammed shut. With the light gone, the only audience for his fear was the bottomless darkness. I lowered him down enough so the fall would not be fatal, then let go. A loud crack echoed around the pit, but was drowned out by the following scream. His brittle bones had broken from the drop. I waited until his howling died to a whimper. I had questions I wanted answered. If I had to wait for his pain to settle, so be it. I had all of eternity to wait. Time was difficult to tell in the shadows, but when his voice was gone and all he did was sniffle, I asked, "What is your name?" His breath caught in his throat, then stopped. He was holding it. I didn't need to hear to find him. Even silence was too loud to hide from me. I moved a limb toward him, jostling him into yelping. His breathing came back, panicked and shaky. In a hushed voice, he prayed to whatever god he thought would listen. Foolish to think they would heed his words from here. I asked again, "What is your name?" Nothing through his prayers. I waited until he stopped. Then again, "What is your name?" "Leave me alone!" His words were muffled, but still a yell. He was curled into a ball, head between his knees. "There is no escape from here," I said. "Millennia trapped in here would yield no options were you to live that long. It is a mercy to be granted a death as swift as what I will give you. Return the favor and tell me your name, or I will make it slow." "My name, I'm Reese. And what year is it?" His voice was low, words mushed together, so I repeated myself. 1150, he said. "Is it?" This calendar was moving quickly. 2 decades since my last meal. "Very well then, thank you. As promised, a swift death." His panic returned. I heard the shift in his breath, the protest rising in his throat, but I was already moving. I was swift, wrapping around his head and crushing it before he could scream. Skin and bones, I swallowed him whole. It was nice to be fed again. The ceiling opened, the light was blinding. It had been a long time. I waited for the screams, the terror. Instead, I heard what sounded like grunting, growling, high-pitched but guttural noises. Whatever they tied to the rope, it was not afraid of the fall. Were it not for the sight of the feet lowering into the pit, I wouldn't have known it to be human. I could not remember the last time I'd seen anything besides, so the sight was disappointing. The feet were swinging, kicking. They struck the edge of the opening, sending a rattling sound echoing around me. Even when they were too far down to strike anything, they lashed out. Each movement was accentuated by a grunt or a yell. It was not until the human was lowered down to their waist that I heard him speak. This boy was young. "You pay for this, you bastards. I'll kill you. I'll find my way back and drag you to hell with me if I have to." Each word was accompanied by an especially passionate swing of his legs. He was swinging by the time I could see his whole body. Young, yes, and small. Perhaps half the height of the old man I'd eaten before, but no more than the third the years. Even still, he had energy that I doubted the old man had ever seen. I waited for him to stop moving to grab the rope, but he wriggled and struggled against the rope on his own. It moved and swung about as he made attempt after attempt to escape. Where he hoped to go, I had no idea, but I cut his antics short. I seized the rope and pulled until it snapped. As soon as the tension broke, the ceiling shut and returned me to the shadows. The boy did not stop struggling. He picked up the pace, however, moving faster as I lowered him. I let him drop to the floor and heard a thump, but no breaking bones. He was sturdier than the last. Seeing as he wasn't screaming or delirious, I wasted no time. "What is your name?" He stopped. The fear finally gripped him. To my surprise, something like disappointment settled inside me. His anger and passion had been entertaining, but he was just a human. A voice in the dark and a mass of limbs they couldn't see left them quivering and soiled. The disappointment was almost enough to make me forego my next questions altogether and just eat him on the spot. I repressed the urge and settled for reaching forward to shake him until he answered my question. "You can talk?" I stopped my limb before it reached him. His voice did not shake. His breathing was quick, yes, but he'd been moving non-stop since the ceiling had opened. He was not afraid. "You were surprised?" "I didn't think beasts could talk," he said. He was so nonchalant, the gall of this boy. Strange how humanity could change over the millennia. "I am not a beast, child," I said, drawing closer. He couldn't see me, he couldn't see anything for that matter, but the sound of my many limbs dragging across the stone floor would paint a vivid enough picture in his mind. "Is that what they call me?" "They call you a lot of things, but beast is what I heard the most." "A beast." It was insulting. They couldn't even remember what I was, it had been so long. Otherwise they would not dare dishonor my accomplishments, regardless of what I'd become. They turned me into this, and they had the audacity to let that history die with them. "Isn't that what you are?" I slid closer, close enough that he would be able to smell the rot coming from my body, hear the heaving motions as I settled into place. I was colossal, dwarfing him even after centuries of starving in this pit. "What I am is of no concern to you. You will not be alive much longer. So while you are, answer me this. What is your name? For the first time in longer than I could remember, I got a clear response. Roan. Roan? Good, I said. And what year is it? His answer took a bit longer. He sounded uncertain when he said 1432. You're certain, I asked? He said he was. Almost 3 centuries since they'd last fed me. They were forgetting about me. How long until I was left in the darkness forever? And you? What? I couldn't recall anyone ever asking a question of me that wasn't a plea for mercy. There was something wrong with this boy. If I wasn't so hungry, I would have let him die off on his own so I hadn't developed whatever affliction he had. What's your name? If it were an era earlier, I would have laughed. What escaped my body instead was a dry wheeze, like a stream of leaking air followed by a low rumble. I have no name, boy. So you are just a beast. I am no beast. My voice shook the pit, echoing off in each never-ending direction. I am not a beast, nor am I a demon. Monster is close to the truth. It's what they made me. They made you? No one knew what I was. They thought I was a beast, some animal in a pit that they could feed the scraps of their society. Did I even know the truth anymore? I went through the story in my head, but didn't realize I was saying it out loud at the same time. They found me starving to death and nursed me back to health. They saved me, then strapped me to a table and did whatever they could to make me useful. They kidnapped you? Is it kidnapping if there's no one to steal you from? He went quiet. I waited a moment, then asked, Were you kidnapped, boy? Something changed. A palpable anger in the air, or perhaps it was just my intuition, but I felt his rage before he growled, Is it kidnapping if your parents hand you over to them without a fight? He didn't give me a chance to speak. They gave me away, like I meant nothing. I'll make them pay. I'll kill them. You'll never make it out of here to do it. Then I'll crawl up from hell and drag them down with me. This is the closest you're getting to hell, Roan. You're stuck with me, alive or dead. For the first time, he sounded lost. The anger left his sails and let his spirits drop. What do you mean? When they fixed me, they turned me into a weapon. They called me the spearhead, sending me out at the front of armies to clear a path and break through city walls. I was unstoppable, unrelenting. All they had to do was keep me fed and nothing could stand in their way. But they could only ration so much to me and the soldiers. What would happen when I grew too hungry? It was a lesson they learned the hard way. The first taste of human blood flashed into my mind. I was so small then. Large, yes, for a human, but smaller even than I was in the pit. The soldiers' rations did little more than take the edge off. I needed a meal, and after a week of this ravenous hunger, I broke. He was sitting in front of a campfire with some of his fellow soldiers. Their laughter was loud. How I didn't wake their brothers in arms was beyond me, but I didn't question it as I stalked up behind. He didn't see me, couldn't hear me over the sound of the crackling fire and their raucous conversation. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came as I ripped his throat out and chewed the meat from his bones. The others grabbed their weapons, crying out for help and stabbing at me to help their brother. He was dead by the time they stood, but they tried. They tried, yes, they tried in vain. I was as unstoppable as ever, and their spears broke against my skin. It did not take long for fear to take hold. I was a monster, and I looked apart as I chewed through his armor. I ate fast, however, and gave chase even faster. I caught them before they reached anyone else. I crushed them, all of them, and ate every part of them. Each body I consumed, I grew, a leg here, an arm there. In a sense, I took a piece of them with me. I could not claim to be human after that night. After that, no food but human would do. So, instead of letting their own soldiers be my fodder, the generals and leaders told me to consume the bodies of the dead. What did they care? It kept me fed, kept me strong, kept them strong, and I grew. At war's end, I was an abomination, full of legs, arms, heads, bodies that were not mine at the start. The bigger I got, the hungrier I became. I think those that found me knew that their system would not last. They needed a way to put an end to me, but I could not be killed. So they put you in this hole, Roan asked? Because you were scared? They starved me, weakened me, and buried me here. Maybe at one point I could have broken free, but now I am too small and weak. I do not feed enough to gain back my strength, and what I am fed does not last. With how long it took for them to bring you to me, I have doubts they will ever feed me again. He went silent. It was strange, being in silence with another living being. It was always just myself, or there was the crying and sniffling whatever pale-faced sacrifice they dumped on me. After all this time, the company was nice. I held off on consuming Roan for this reason. Spearhead? Hearing the name surprised me. It sent a shiver down every spine that ran down my back. Can you starve to death? I cannot be killed. Then, why don't you just stop eating? Are you trying to get me to spare you? Hearing my story and using it against me? Interesting strategy, I had to admit. It will not work. No, he said. Why don't you let the bodies pile up down here? Wait until you have a stockpile, then you can eat them all at once and be strong again. Would that work? There's no guarantee I will ever be fed again. I could leave your body in here to rot and wait, and there would be no reward. So what if it doesn't work? Impatient edged his voice. He was getting excited. If his arms weren't bound to his side, they'd be clenched in fists in front of him. You can't die, so eating just helps the pain now, right? But if you eat me now and you never get fed again, it's not going to be any worse than if you just let me be and wait until more bodies come. You're awfully cavalier about being consumed. I'm going to die here, right? You said I was stuck here, alive or dead. But you said that you gained something from each person you ate, and if me dying can help you get out of here with a piece of me inside you, then that's enough for me. You just need to promise me one thing. A promise? Assuming this worked, it was a small detail. If he was right, though, I would not forget this. I will be indebted to you for my freedom. What do you ask of me? Crush them. All of them. Make them pay for putting us down here. What is your name? Bran, the man said. In what year? 1921. A long time. A very, very long time. But damn you, Roan, you were right. They brought me another body. They remembered. Waiting this long was torture, with the temptation of your flesh just within my reach, but I waited. I had been waiting for millennia, after all. Here I was, being rewarded for my patience with an inkling of hope. Well, Bran, I said, Roan and I thank you for your sacrifice. It will not be in vain. I killed him with one bone-crushing blow, but for the second time in my captive life, I did not consume my victim. I moved him over to where Roan waited, still covered in flesh without the outside world able to eat away at him. It took 500 years, but our plan was in motion. 2300, 2417, 3364, 3390. Years, centuries, millennia, but gods did they fly by with a light at the end of the tunnel. My pit was closed off from the rest of the world. Nothing lived here other than me. As torturous as that was, it also meant that there was nothing to decay the bodies. They built up, the pile growing. I stopped counting after 24, but my estimate was somewhere around 3 times that. Roan. The plate in the ceiling shifted. A square pillar of light shone down, announcing the fall of one last angel. I lumbered over to the pile of the damned and breathed in their scent. I had a feast before me, and above me, a promise to fulfill. Today is the day we crawl up from hell.
And next up, we have Taylor Wolthuizen reading her piece, Devour. Taylor Wolthuizen is a senior at SMSU, pursuing a creative writing major with a psychology minor. She's from Edgerton, Minnesota, and other activities she enjoys include listening to music, binging Netflix shows, and making her friends laugh. She's undecided on what to do after graduating SMSU at this time. Please welcome Taylor Wolthuizen.
So the inspiration for this piece was a creative writing assignment first, and then it came from, I was talking to an acquaintance of mine, and he was talking about how a girl he knew had a praying mantis, and my imagination just kind of ran away with that, and it became this piece. Like a praying mantis, I bite when provoked. Most living things react the same way. Sometimes I do it to be provocative. Being a vampire would be cool too. Drew blood once, but that's because my lip ring scratched against their neck. I just suck a hickey up from within their deepest desires, make their blood rush to that one spot, and then bite it. Normally my partners will do the same because they know I enjoy it. I like to give them something to sink their teeth into. I'll circle completely around their neck before devouring their head, like a female praying mantis does to the male. I have a tattoo of one on my neck, only most people don't see it. It's a hungry female preparing to feast. And so is my partner, as well as myself, and there's almost a whole ring around her neck.
And next up, we have Victoria Simon reading her piece, Freedom of Self. Victoria Simon is a fourth-year student originating from Northeast Minneapolis. Some of her interests in life include her 2 dogs, messing around with her makeup, and of course, reading and writing. Her sweet spot for writing is poetry, and the way that you can say so much with so little. This is her first reading, and she's honestly really excited to be able to experience this. Please welcome Victoria Simon.
Hello guys, so this poem is about wanting to reject society's standards, but still feeling compelled to conform to them. The plague of conformity becomes the shackles that weigh us down. She is not like the rest, hem above her tattered knees, eyes lined and deepened with charcoal. She is the exception. What defines us as individuals becomes the marks that stain us. She falls under the view of wandering eyes. Distinction of character leaves unwanted advances. Tainted innocence is the modern era coming of age. She craves to be the exception. To break free from the restraints of others' judgment becomes the infinitive purpose of humankind. She is just like the rest, confined in her own body and mind, left to fight for freedom of self. She can still be the exception. To be free of misconception by others is the becoming of the motions of self-acceptance. Thank you.
And now we will be hearing from Alan Davis. He will be reading his two pieces, The Garden Bandit and Sage Advice. Alan Davis is a senior at SMSU from Louisville, Kentucky. He spends much of his leisure time creating fantasy stories and painting models of the monsters that live in them. His plans after graduation include publishing a novel while pursuing work as a librarian. He also desires, time permitting of course, to be crowned as king of the rabbits from those in his backyard and lead them to battle against his neighbors' gardens. Please welcome Alan Davis.
Okay, so my first piece is The Garden Bandit, which is inspired by the same rabbits that live in my backyard. In thick brush he waits, while his small dark eyes, empty like a starless sky, anxiously watch your footsteps. A nose wiggle and a foot thump alert his friends to the ready. His haunches lock, ears flatten, and teeth grind till you turn around. Then his body is a blur as he dashes between the fragrant patches of marigolds and leaps through the watermelon vines to the lettuce prize gifted only to the bowl. Brown and white pop in and out of sight, till it scales and dives the wire fence. With mouth agape and paws outstretched, years of practice have built to this. He takes 6 snips of a leaf and dashes out, clicking his heels while executing the escape. Now, dodging and weaving from under your car, while his white tail flashes as you give chase. It is only when he leaps into the burrow's safety that the last of his crew leaves the garden in ruins. Then, once the carnage settles in, the symphony begins with the clucking and humming of satisfied hares. Now, below your yard, where that burrow lay still, a scheming little prince settles in for the day. With his heist complete and stomach quite full, rest so he may torment your garden another day. Okay, and my next piece is Sage Advice, which is kind of just inspired by these stories that I like to read and write. Don't poke a dragon with a flimsy stick, or you'll only succeed in becoming a shiny wick. Don't trust a fairy's sweet and alluring words, for its slick tongue is a crook that revels in being heard. Don't wander into the woods when the moon is red and full, unless you wish to be cursed with bloody claws and fur. Don't go ignoring my sage advice. I promise that you will not survive. This land is ruled by the cruel and depraved, who will do anything to see you stay.
All right, and now we will be hearing from Allison Turinger. She will be reading her pieces Shards and Projecting. Allison Turinger is a senior psychology major with a minor of criminal justice, and her hometown is Sioux Falls, South Dakota. She enjoys reading and creative writing as hobbies, as well as painting and watching crime documentaries. Please welcome Allison Thuringer.
All right, the first piece that I'll be reading is called Shards. Today was my 52nd first day of school. I saw so many faces, some new, but many familiar. I wondered what they were up to this summer. My spot mounted on the bathroom wall allows insight that others don't see. Everyone acts like themselves when they're left alone with the bathroom mirror. I've had a long life here in this school, and I'm sure you would know it just by looking at me. I may not have wrinkles, but my face is covered in scars thanks to years of vandalism, repairs, and careless teens tossing their gym bags around like water balloons. The first day of school is always a busy one for me. There's a steady flow of nervous freshman girls scurrying in to check their hair, apply some makeup, or, on occasion, remove it as they wipe their red eyes with a sleeve. I usually get to know the latter best, although I can't say the older girls are much better at keeping secrets from me. Being the centerpiece over the sinks in a girls' washroom gives me a front row seat to all of their drama. This morning before classes started, a new girl came into the bathroom. She was wearing a nice blue skirt with a white blouse, and her backpack was stuffed full. She walked into a stall, and I didn't think much of it. Kids bring all kinds of things into the bathroom. I learned that a long time ago. But when she walked back out of the stall, I hardly recognized her. She was now clad in torn black jeans and a dark t-shirt that was clearly a couple sizes too big. She walked up to me and penciled on some heavy eyeliner below her eyes and a deep purple lipstick to go with it, before rushing back out of the room. I saw her again at the end of the day, just after the bell, rushing into a stall to return to her nicer clothes. She nearly walked out with her purple lips and heavy liner, but quickly caught herself and pulled out a wipe to get rid of all traces of the makeup. This girl certainly wasn't the first to do this. I've seen girls come in here to alter themselves before class for years. I always remember the girl a few years ago who walked in every morning with a flat chest and left the bathroom with a bra so stuffed full of toilet paper they wouldn't even move. Even now that she has something to work with, she has to show it all off with a big push-up bra and low-cut shirts that let everything hang out. School has been going for a couple of weeks now, and this year has been mostly the same as the rest. My bathroom is still the go-to place for gossip, meltdowns, and vaping. For a long time, I would watch girls year after year come in here for cigarette breaks during the day. Then cigarettes turned into smoking pot, and probably some other things too. And now all they want to do is vape. I don't know what's in that stuff, but it sure does cloud up my room. Lunchtime is always a rush in the girls' bathroom, and today was no exception. After the bell, I could hear a wave of footsteps and voices heading my way, and before I knew it, the door swung open into the wall as people filed in. There was the usual line of girls in a row that led out the door, waiting for an empty stall. It's always interesting to notice which girls spend their time in line looking directly at me, concerned only with their hair, in contrast to those who seem to avoid me at all costs. Today at lunch there was a new avoider. I don't know her name since nobody spoke to her, but she was a tall girl with dark blonde hair and a gray jacket. As a matter of fact, I've seen her before, always keeping her head down so she wouldn't see her face in mine. This was the first time I've seen her when it's been packed like that, though. She usually comes in the middle of class periods and goes to the farthest stall from the door. I've heard her crying a few times, and once the janitor came in with a mop after she left. I really feel for that girl. She seems like a good kid, and I can only imagine what she's going through to do that to herself. Well, we've made it through the first quarter of the school year. I think these kids need a break soon. Some of them have really been acting up lately, even more than usual. Today, a group of 3 girls from the volleyball team came in wearing their usual bright blue sweatshirts and matching Adidas shoes, almost like a high-end Heaven's Gate cult. Though, I'm sure none of them even know what that is. At first, I thought they were just standing around to gossip, but then I noticed the needle they were passing around. One of the girls was holding a tiny glass bottle. I could only make out tetrahydro on the label, but couldn't read the rest. After the needle had been passed around, the girl tucked the bottle back into her backpack, and the trio left. Even after over 50 years here, that was a first for me. Today was the first day back after winter break. I was excited to have the lights back on and see some familiar faces again, but now I wish the lights had just stayed off. This morning, one of the girls walked in wearing a baggy sweatshirt, which is a trick I've seen before. She walked into the handicapped stall, and I was expecting to hear the sound of morning sickness hitting the water in the toilet bowl. Instead, I heard a lot of grunting, quiet at first, but it quickly grew louder and more frequent until it became a muffled scream. She must have shoved something in her mouth to quiet the noise, and apparently it worked since nobody came in to check. After 45 minutes or so, the screaming came to a climax, and I heard something flop onto the floor, hard. There was no crying. All I could do was hang there on the wall and listen as this girl tried to clean up her mess. When she finally came back out of the stall, her eyes were red and swollen, and her hair was damp with sweat. She stood over the sink below me for a while, just breathing. Then she washed her hands and rubbed the water over her face, mixing the tears and sweat together into one. She left the bathroom, leaving her backpack and the baby behind for someone else to find. And they did. I spent the next 2 hours waiting for the evidence to be found, and sure enough, it was. The poor girl had just come in to use the bathroom and was unfortunate enough to discover that small, lifeless body left alone inside a backpack. The girl screamed and ran out of the bathroom, returning just a minute later with one of the teachers. The backpack was collected, and the janitor spent a long time cleaning up. Once word got out about what happened, the bathroom was crowded with girls trying to see any missed trace of the events that had happened. Luckily, after the lunch hour ended, they cleared out again. Eventually, a couple of girls came into the bathroom arguing with each other. It sounded like one of the girls had been sleeping with the other's boyfriend, and things got heated very quickly. I've seen fights like this before, but usually they don't get this hostile. Then the bomb dropped. How was it she found out her friend was sleeping with her boyfriend? The three of them suddenly all tested positive for chlamydia. After that, everything happened so fast. One girl punched the other in the stomach, then kicked her to the ground. She tried to get up, but was kicked again, this time in the nose. Immediately she was bleeding, and this must have satisfied her assailant, because she simply walked past and out of the bathroom. The girl on the floor slowly pulled herself up onto her feet, using the sink to aid her, and she grabbed a paper towel to plug the stream coming from her nose. She washed the blood off of her hands, then just looked at herself in me for a long time. Her expression kept changing between hatred and hurt. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I don't know if they were from pain or anger. After a while, she used her sleeve to wipe the evidence from her face. Her jaw tightened, her brows furrowed, and her mouth turned down in rage. The next thing I saw was a ringed fist rushing towards me, and suddenly I was a mess of edges lying in and around the sink. I could hear her march out of the room, but not before a few drops of blood dripped across my broken face. After 52 years on that wall, I was finally seeing a new perspective. And I suppose those girls were too. And my second piece is called Projecting. Charlie had never been to a funeral before. He was only 7, but he was mature for his age, a quiet and observant type. His mom had told him that today would be the last time he could see his grandpa Otto, and did everything she could to help him understand. "Are you ready for all of this?" asked his mom as they entered the church. Charlie nodded, his slightly too large hat sliding a little with the movement. He always liked to wear his gray driving cap, and his grandma encouraged his mom to let him wear it to the funeral too. After all, Grandpa Otto was the one who got it for him. Charlie held his mom's hand as they walked to the front of the sanctuary to see his grandpa. As they approached him, he noticed that his mom's hand began to shake, so he held on tighter. They stood together over the casket and looked in at Otto, and Charlie looked at his face. He didn't look quite the same as he remembered, but Charlie knew that he had been sick. He looked to his left at the big picture of his grandpa. He looked just the way Charlie remembered him, with a big smile on his face. "See, Mom, Grandpa Otto is wearing a hat in his picture, too," Charlie whispered to his mother. She smiled at him and gave his hand a squeeze. He looked back down at his grandpa and realized why he didn't look quite right. He didn't have any hair. "Mom, where's Grandpa's hair?" he asked, confused. "Well, son," his mother began slowly, "remember how Grandpa Otto was sick?" "Yeah, I remember," he replied. "Well, Grandpa's sickness made his hair fall out. He didn't like it, so sometimes he would wear a little wig under his hat so he didn't look bald. That's why you always saw him with hair." "Oh," said Charlie, suddenly feeling very heavy. He saw that his mom's eyes were shiny now, and she looked down. He took off his hat and touched his own smooth head, then looked back at his grandpa, then at his mom. "Was he sick like me?" he asked quietly. "Yes, he was. He had cancer too, but his was in his lungs." Charlie didn't know what to say. He knew the word cancer because the doctors told him it was in his bones, but he never knew Grandpa Otto's sickness was cancer too. Charlie's face flushed, and he quickly tried to cover his grandpa's head with the hat from his own. "Charlie, what are you doing? Stop that right now," his mother said, shocked. Charlie struggled against his mother's grip on his arm, trying to cover his grandpa's head. "No, Mom, Grandpa needs a hat," he shouted, louder than he meant to. His mother stopped out of surprise. "Grandpa shouldn't look like that. He wouldn't like it. He needs a hat." Charlie gathered himself, then carefully placed his own driving cap onto his grandpa's head, his vision turning blurry. "We don't like people to see us like that."
And finishing off our reading today will be ShyAnn Anderson with her 4 pieces, Wanted, Home, Ope, and the Bells. ShyAnn Anderson is a former SMSU student who graduated in May with a creative writing degree. She is from Bird Island, Minnesota, and in her free time she enjoys reading, writing, and wishing that she was still in school. Please welcome ShyAnn Anderson.
My first piece is Wanted. There's a wanted man in my living room, sleeping on my couch. He crawled in through the window I left open last night. It's much easier this way. Last time he slit the screen. I think tomorrow I might just give him a key. My second piece is Home. There's just something about it, that old small town. The one where everyone knows your name, everyone knows each other, all their secrets and their shame. There's nothing wrong with leaving, because one day you know you'll come back. You'll say, I grew up over there, next to the train tracks. The yard used to flood and the neighbors had a willow tree. I'd walk to school every day with the girl down the street. It'll all still look the same, because that's just how it works. These small towns never truly leave us, even if you put in the work. The next piece is Ope, which, if you couldn't tell by the title, is inspired by Minnesota. We have our own language, you know. There's just something about it that we all understand. We know it's pop and not soda, that no yeah means yes and yeah no means no. It's gray duck, not goose, hot dish, not casserole. That 40 degrees, well, that ain't nothing. We have ice and lake water in our blood and shovels in the trunks of our cars. We have 30-minute goodbyes, and everybody has a Prince story. We say oofta and yeah, sure, you betcha, because we're Minnesotans. It's just the way we are. My final piece is The Bells. He's running. No one's ever gotten away before, but God damn it if he isn't going to be the first. He should have known better. In fact, he did. But he thought that maybe this year it'd be different. Was there any evidence to suggest that it was going to be different? No. Did he think that anyway? Yes. Was being a stupid optimist going to get him killed? Probably. He knows the rules. He grew up in this village. They had been ingrained into his mind since he could walk. He knew them before he knew how to spell his own name. When the bells chime 3 times, you get inside and you stay inside, his mother would say to him. You lock the doors and the windows. Then you put out the fire and you sit. These rules are a part of him. He followed them without hesitation for years. Every year, except this year. He heard all the stories, the people who went out after the bells and didn't come back. There never was any sign of them being there again, nor any sign that they ever were. Sometimes he thought it would just might be an excuse to hide when someone ran away from the village. He'd always wondered what would really happen if one year he didn't put out the fire, or didn't lock the windows. Hell, what would happen if he just stayed outside when the bells went off? He never thought he'd try it. His mother would have skinned him if he did. But she didn't make it through the winter this year, her age finally catching up with her. So this year, when the bells chimed 3 times, he didn't run home. He stayed, finished putting the hay on the stack, and slowly walked home. Then he felt it, the shift in the air. And he knew, without even looking, that he had to run. He hears it, heavy breathing and even heavier footsteps, stalking him, slowly getting closer. He knows he has to hide. Too far away from his home to make it there. Running through the mud and grass, he makes it to the bell tower. The watchman's inside with the door locked. He'll never let him in. Behind it, next to the woodpile, not perfect but good enough. It'll have to be. He's crouching down, hand over his mouth to quiet his breathing. He doesn't hear it anymore, thinking maybe he outran it. He hears a twig snap, looks up. There's a little girl ahead, standing out in the open. He tries to wave her down, tries to get her to hide, but she's not looking at him. Instead, she's looking past him with a smile on her face. Then he feels the hot breath on his neck, hears the wet lips curling back into a snarl.
Thank you guys all so much for coming and listening to these amazing pieces that these guys put together. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. If you guys want free book of perceptions. They're back by the door there. And there's also programs if you guys didn't get one. And if any of you guys are interested in working on the next edition of Perceptions, I would be the person to talk to. So I'll be around for a little bit if any of you guys are interested. Thank you again so much.